Gentlemen, the Russian aggression in Ukraine has completely changed the security and defense landscape in Europe. This war has not just opened our eyes to the need for Europe to step up, but also to look to the future and the skies for evolving areas that will have an impact in our ability to keep citizens safe. Industry remains important, even more than important, central in this discussion. And we are very pleased to be working with ASD, the Association for Security Defense Industries in Europe, to make this conference as targeted as possible to the solutions Europe can bring forward. So whether the panels will be looking at space, cybersecurity, hybrid threats, maritime routes, decarbonizing defense, or critical infrastructure, we count on your engagement throughout the day to bring back all what have been said to your work, your research, your community. Allow me to extend a special thanks to those joining us today, with a note that due to unexpected matters, well, to be fair, not completely unexpected, both Ukrainian Defense Minister and Commissioner Breton will be joining us via pre-recorded message. But we are very happy to be welcoming in person High Representative Borrell, Admiral Bauer, Vice President Skinas, Michael Johansson, General Graziano, and many more CEOs, officials, and civil society. And thank you very much indeed to all of them to make this day possible. Please also send your reactions on social media using the hashtag EDSS2023. Now I'm honored to be yielding to our co-organizer for the summit, my friend Jan Pied from ASD, who has been central in putting this whole day together. I wish you all a fruitful debate, and Jan, you have the floor.
So thank you for that, Arnaud, and let me also extend my very warm welcome to all of you being with us in the room today. It's a pleasure to see so many being available for this important conference, and also for those of you being online, being with us following the conference as it is direct streamed. So this is a pleasure. And I can only agree with what Arnaud said, that raising awareness today amongst policymakers and the public on the importance of the defense industry is really not needed in the same way it was just a couple of years ago. The daily reports from Ukraine show us just how vital it is to have the equipment you need at the time when you actually need it to be able to defend your country and your citizens against military aggression. And that freedom and peace are not a given seems to be something that is very obvious to everyone today. Still, we believe that this conference is more important than ever before, but for other reasons than raising awareness. What we are seeing now is that what we're living through is a real turning point. This is a change of paradigm, and it comes along with enormous challenges. These are challenges for citizens, for politicians, for our armed forces, and for our industry. For decades, we took peace and freedom as a given, and the public spendings focused more or less on everything but defense. And investment in defense-related R&D and acquisition programs has therefore been heavily reduced over decades, and this is a peacetime planning that has led to small production volumes and also decreased production capacities. So this is where we are. Now, warning signals were there, Georgia 2008, Crimea 2014, but to be honest, most of us didn't really want to see those signals. It's true during this period that NATO fixed its 2% target. It's also true that in some member states, the downward trend on defense spending actually came to a halt. But to be honest, in the western part of Europe, very few of us could imagine what was about to happen on the 24th of February 2022. A full-scale military aggression against a peaceful neighbor, high-intensity warfare, war, and war crimes. And out of the sudden, we must now catch up. We must revise our well-established processes and habits, and we have to do this fast. In fact, we have to do it very fast in order to be able to enable to our armed forces to protect our own territory, to support Ukraine in defending its territory, and thereby also defending our security and our values. And it is this kickstart that is an enormous challenge for us. It raises many very important questions, and these are the questions we want to discuss today. The ramp-up of production, technological superiority, hybrid threats, cybersecurity, protection of critical infrastructure, space, all of these are issues of utmost importance, and they deserve an in-depth public debate. And that's why we were happy to team up with EBS to arrange the Defense and Security Summit this year. So that's all from me, wishing you all again very warm welcome, and we will now start the conference. And this we will do, as Arnaud just said. Unfortunately, Commissioner Breton could not be with us, but he has delivered a recorded message, and I think we will start the conference by playing that video. So welcome everyone again.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to address you today in this critical juncture. I am only sorry that I cannot be there in person, but I know that DG DEFI is well represented at this event today. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine has radically changed the security environment in Europe. And Europe has been at the forefront in unity and solidarity with Ukraine, supplying defense equipment, demonstrating the usefulness of the European Peace Facility. Of course, we do not lose sight of the mid to long-term enhancement of our defense cooperation, which is more important, of course, than ever in these new geopolitical realities. And as a result, complementary to the urgency of the support of Ukraine, Europe has also developed its own defense doctrine with the strategic compass. And we operationalize this vision on cyber with, for example, the Cyber Solidarity Act, or on space with the new constellation IRIS². And of course also with the implementation of the European Defence Fund, investing roughly 1 billion euros per year in developing state-of-the-art union capabilities for the long term. Allow me, however, to focus on the most urgent issue we are facing today. The commitment to deliver 1 million ammunition for Ukraine within 12 months. Artillery ammunitions, tanks ammunitions, or missiles. European defense industry must now move into a war economy mode. To achieve this, together with High Representative Josep Borrell and the Defense Minister of the 27 Member States, we have defined a 3-point plan. First, continue to release Member State stocks by mobilizing 1 billion euro from the Peace Facility. Second, purchasing together through joint contracts, again, 1 billion euro from a Peace Facility of ammunition. And third, ensuring the industrial ramp-up, because we know that placing a contract, even a joint one, is not enough to ensure delivery on time and in volume. It is in this context that I initiated a tour of the ground to get a good understanding of our actual Europe's industrial capacities. My main takeaway is that we have a real production capacity in Europe, but it needs to be ramped up and faster than the current plans I have heard from the industry so far. But I'm confident that within 12 months, with the right support, speed and mindset of our industry, we can increase our production capacity to 1 million rounds per year in Europe. And to help achieving this objective, I proposed last week a new initiative, the Act in Support Ammunition Production, or ASAP, to support ammunition industrial production based on 2 pillars. First, a program of 500 million euros to directly support industrial projects enabling the European industrial base to be ramped up for finished product and also, of course, supply chains. I therefore call on ammunition production companies to develop concrete projects very quickly, which could benefit from up to 60% co-financing to increase their production. We also are clear that if member states want, they can use cohesion funds and RRF funds to support directly these projects. And we push on the financial sector, of course, also to take its responsibility and share of the effort and to ensure access to finance to the defense industry. The second pillar aims at lifting temporary any regulatory barriers to a fast ramp-up on permitting, working time, public procurement procedures, transfer within the single market of ammunition parts, and so on. With ASAP, ASAP, we aim to consolidate the European defense industrial base to meet Ukraine's needs and meet Europe's new security challenges in the long term. While we are answering this concrete and urgent need, we are also consolidating for the long term our defense industrial basis to face the realities of high-intensity conflicts. This is important for Ukraine. This is also important for the security of our citizens in Europe. Thank you.
New reality since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Many believed that wars of this scale were no longer possible in Europe. Some European armies were disarmed, de facto in exchange for Russian gas. Defense needs were sidelined. The United States became the main security donor for Europe. Concomitantly, Europe developed a critical dependence on Moscow. In this new reality, a year into the big war, last month the UN Security Council was chaired by a representative of Russia, a terrorist state committing full-scale aggression and the genocide of the Ukrainian people. An arrest warrant has been issued for the Kremlin leader for the crime of kidnapping thousands of Ukrainian children. Nevertheless, Russia holds the right of veto in international affairs. It is a brilliant illustration that the UN mechanisms in their present form are not matched to the global security challenges. Furthermore, the OSCE has disappeared off the map of the security architecture. Finland's accession to NATO has de facto put an end to the history of agreements based on the 1975 Helsinki Act. The Kremlin has also resorted to open nuclear blackmail. This is the final nail in the coffin of another component of the global security architecture, nuclear weapons non-proliferation treaties. In terms of threats, what do we see in the medium and long-term perspectives? First, according to the NATO Madrid Summit Declaration, the Russian Federation is the most significant and direct threat to the allied security and to the peace and stability in the Euro-Atlantic region. This threat is here to stay for years, and it needs a proportional response. Second, we see a rapid reapproachment of the regimes that favor the world order based on the rule of force instead of the rule of law. Russia using Iranian drones to target peaceful Ukrainian cities is a brilliant illustration of their plans. Our war with the Russians isn't a local clash. There is no local solution, tactic or territorial change that would put an end to this war. In reality, this is a clash between civilizations, and its results will have consequences across the entire world. If Russian aggression succeeds to any degree, it will empower every regime interested in using force to get their way. Therefore, it is in Europe's best interest for Ukraine to win. What has the war taught us? Thanks to the assistance from the free countries, Ukraine is now performing the mission that the NATO was created for. Ukraine is Europe's shield in the east from the Russian threat. We are destroying a military power that was targeting European values and freedoms. The larger part of the power that we have stopped and are in the process of destroying is not even Russian, it's Soviet. We are completing the mission and putting an end to the Russian Empire. Together we have learned how to build supply chains of unthinkable scale and complexity in weeks, how to establish an enormous training system in months, and how to make all the political, diplomatic, economic, and military tools for work together for one common goal, how to adjust and how to win. If we want peace and security for Europe, we need to move forward. First, there is no alternative to Ukraine in the NATO. The Baltic Sea will become NATO's internal sea. There is no viable alternative to making the Black Sea a NATO sea as well. The alliance's security infrastructure needs to be scaled up to the east. Second, there is no alternative to scaling up the military-industrial complex. Weapons and ammunition manufacturing needs to be relaunched fast. This needs to be done to meet two goals. On the one hand, to replenish the stockpiles of European countries. After all, you have sent a lot of your stockpiles to help us, and we appreciate that. A strong modern army is a real security guarantee at the time when NATO can be blocked by a single country falling under Russian sway. On the other hand, time is of the essence. Prolonging or freezing the war means lost lives, means human suffering. Ukraine wants to turn the tide on the battlefield this year. Ukraine has already proven on the battlefield that victory is possible. But we need help. And it is important to note one thing. In order to guarantee a qualitative advantage in the future, Europe needs to rearm with an eye not on the past, but in our current experience. Ukrainian companies are also interested in cooperating, and we can bring a lot to the table. We have the most extensive experience of the battlefield usage of Western weapons. We are currently demonstrating the advantages of Western weapons over Russian weapons on the battlefield. That has been clear for the whole world to see. This will inevitably lead to defense strategic being redrawn and to change on the market. Fewer Russian weapons means fewer Russian influences. Therefore, it is in our shared best interests that Ukraine receives as much of the already existing weapons and ammunition as possible, as soon as possible. We will use it to crush Russia's offensive potential. In the meantime, European countries will get an opportunity to invest not in maintaining the equipment that will eventually become outdated, but in rearming with the new weapons. This will give Europe an advantage and strengthen its defenses while also providing a stimulus for its economy. I am certain that this message needs to be heard at the level of pan-EU institutions and delivered to individual governments and nations. Thank you for your attention. Slava Ukraini!
Okay, well, that was... Go for it. Okay, well, that was Ukraine's defense minister. To me, it was interesting that he talked about essentially everything that's happened over the past year. The idea was when the war started, in 3 days this is over, and now he's talking about we will finish Russian imperialism. So you could argue a lot happened in the space of a year. In your perspective, Minister from Lithuania, and obviously there's a very close geographical proximity, but also a history that you vindicate in terms of, well, your own history, but also the sympathy that you obviously feel for Ukraine. What's happened this entire year, in your view? What's changed? For the better, worse, and how do you see things?
Yeah, thank you very much. So yes, indeed, the conference is very timely, and the topic is very timely, because what is happening now in Ukraine, it should not have happened, in fact, because we had already many lessons learned, and we had already many red lines crossed. Take it like 2008 invasion to Georgia, 2014 annexation of Crimea, and this is where we had already those clear signals that Russia doesn't respect any international rules, any international order. They are just crossing the lines one after the other. So the war in Ukraine, it was the ultimate line that they were crossing. And this is the ultimate signal to us, actually, because there will be no other signals if we do not react and respond adequately. And what we are doing now, this is a very positive way of responding, because the increase of the defense production, the increase of the financing of the defense sector, the increase of the funds that are going into defense, this is all very positive, because this is how we need to react. This is how we need to send the signal to our adversary that we are ready to be equal, let's say, in equal competition with them. Because we are living in the world of the strategic competition. And in this world, we need to show what is our position and how we stand. And this we can do only standing together, united, and joining the forces. And this is what Mr. Breton was saying, how it is now the European Union reacting and how it's investing into the defense sector. I think this is a very positive sign, because this is how we can join our forces, integrate our industries, and help each other to be in better condition, in better military condition, and to be in better state of preparedness, so that the potential adversary would not be able to do any harm to us, would not be able to cross the line. I'm very sorry, and it's very frustrating that everything now, what is happening in Ukraine, because this is like a testing ground where we are testing also our, I would say, military equipment, we're testing our preparedness, and it's very frustrating that it's happening in Ukraine, in the country that is very close from us. And it's our responsibility to help them. It's our responsibility to provide them with the weaponry, with the proper equipment. It's our responsibility to help them to very clear signal that what we represent, the values that we represent, they are strong, that we are united, and we are capable of supporting our partner that is representing our values.
Well, thank you for that, Minister. And Karl, I'm not going to ask you, he's joining us online, I'm not going to ask you how this ends. I mean, it's a very difficult question, but going back to the idea of existential, both sides say this is an existential moment for our two countries. In your perspective, what is the best case scenario? What is the scenario that you think may be more likely to manifest? But also, do you think people understand the implications that Russia somehow prevails here? The real implications that this have, or this is still hypotheticals on people's minds?
I think to take up your question, that the war is of course existential for Ukraine. That's fairly obvious. I would say it's existential for Belarus as well, because if we go to what Putin really wants to achieve with this particular war, and it's been as explicit as we can expect. He said that he wants to get rid of Ukraine. He hasn't said he wants to get rid of Belarus explicitly. He has to take some consideration for his pal Lukashenko, but that's part of the plan. He wants to re-establish a greater Russia, perhaps not the Soviet Union, but the greater Russia of the sort that existed under the Tsar up until 1917.
Do you believe that, Karl? Do you really believe that? That is the aspiration that he has?
Well, that's what he said. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's been fairly explicit on that. And you can go to the recent tweets by the Vice President of the National Security Council, the former President Medvedev. Fairly sort of undisciplined tweets, but anyhow. He said very explicitly, Ukraine is not needed. That was the words he used. And said that he wants to rebuild what he called a big Russia. So, and Putin is not... He's not a madman. He's not impulsive. He has a very, I wouldn't say sophisticated, but a rather detailed view of where he sees Russian history going. And he can't accept this Russia that is today. He also sees, and that goes to the existential question, he sees the existence of an independent Ukraine, an independent Belarus for that matter, as a threat to his vision of Russia. The existence of an independent Ukraine, the existence of an independent, more or less, Belarus, challenges the greater Russia that he wants to build, and he doesn't see any future just for that limited Russia. I mean, it's a fairly consistent view of history. And that is why he said that with a democratic Ukraine, by the expressed will of its people, moving more towards cooperation with the West, that only increases the danger for his regime, and accordingly has to move militarily. That's what he said. So the conflict is, of course, existential for Ukraine. It's their very existence and independence and territorial integrity that's at stake. But it's also existential for Putin, his regime, and his vision. It is not existential for Russia. Our war, or the war that is waged, is a war to defend against Putin, not necessarily against Russia. I mean, there will be an independent, there will be a sovereign, there will be a strong Russia in the future after this particular war, but there must not be a Putin regime. This conflict will in the one form or the other go on, as long as Mr. Putin is in the Kremlin. That's fairly obvious. And I think it's important to recognize that none of us can predict what's going to happen on the battlefield in the next few weeks or months or even year. But we must recognize that the conflict will be there for a prolonged period of time. There might be a pause but there will not be peace until there has been profound change in the Kremlin. I would say there's not been, we will have uncertainty, instability between the Vistula and the Volga until that change in the Kremlin has occurred. And that is a question not of weeks or months, it's a question of years, it could be even decades. And we must shape our policies accordingly. And this goes to very many of the issues that you have been discussing already with Commissioner Breton. We need to go from a defense industrial base to a war industrial base. We need to do that fairly fast. We need to build European capabilities that are strong. And I stress capabilities. Capabilities are what's needed. Then you can use them either in a, preferably I would say, in a stronger and more balanced relationship across the Atlantic together with Americans, or if that becomes necessary or desired, to do it in a more autonomous mode. But autonomy without capabilities is could even be dangerous, I would say. So the stress must be on building the capabilities, building them long term for our respective countries, and building them for Ukraine. We must look at the task ahead of building strong defense forces for Ukraine for the years to come, for the war and for what comes after the war, because the stability of Ukraine is really the key to the security and stability of Europe in the years to come. And I should go on for too long, but I'm saying this without taking into consideration all of the other issues that are on the table. I mean, we're living in a time of increased geopolitical strain, that's fairly obvious. We are living in a time of very profound technological revolution. I'm coming from a couple of days in Washington discussing the interface between national security and artificial intelligence. And we are coming from a period of accelerating both in economic and environmental fracturing, affecting countries. Look at what's happening to Sudan, look what's happening to Pakistan, and these things should also take into the new priority, urgent priority that Europe must give to its security, its defense, and related policies.
Well, thank you for that. And there's a question that I want to put to you both. Well, for the minister, obviously, because your country is going to organize the NATO summit that will happen in July, but also for Carl. You know, you talked about it is existential for Ukrainians. You also talked about the security component of this. The Ukrainians say they want to join NATO, that they see this as, well, the ultimate safety. If you're not in NATO, you're by yourself, and then you depend on what other people want to give you or do for you. In your view, what are you expecting will come out of this NATO summit? And is it fair to talk about the idea of Ukraine joining NATO, but create a roadmap? Or actually you look at it and you say, this is a country at war, this is premature. Weapons, yes, but something beyond that, it's not very realistic. How do you see it? For Carl first, and then we'll go to you.
Oh, okay. Well, start in Brussels.
You want to go first, Minister?
I can. Yeah.
Go for it.
I do hope. First, I would like to say that I do hope that Sweden will become finally a member of NATO.
Do you think it will happen in July?
I don't know. I'm just. I mean, I am expecting that Sweden would become, and we would reach final agreement among allies, and Sweden will be a member of NATO, because we need Sweden as a member of NATO.
The Turkish election is happening soon, so I guess that
so
could
we will see how it develops. And secondly, in regards of Ukraine, if it was my personal decision, I would say Ukraine should be already a member of NATO, because Ukraine is already showing all the possible and impossible capabilities as the country that is fighting against the enemy with all the force and using all the newest technologies, able to react properly, able to reorganize the militaries. I mean, it's really amazing to see what kind of solutions they have in place, and we have so many things to learn from them, like innovations from the military equipment that are tested in that battleground. These are amazing things that they are doing. But, of course, it's the alliance of democratic allies, and we will see what comes out from NATO summit. But I do hope that there will be some very clear way forward how Ukraine would become a NATO member state.
And that's also what Ukraine hopes, that it's not just an abstract now, but actually a more detailed.
I do hope that it will be not abstract. But again, it's a consensus-based international organization, and we need to respect everybody's opinions. So we will see how it goes.
And Karl, what about you? I mean, the Ukrainians, to some extent, even seem to accept that while the war is going on, obviously they can't join, but that this is just as big as joining the European Union in some ways, that this is the biggest deterrence they can possibly get. For you, is it a good idea? And ultimately, how do you see this play out? Because the question, it's in a defense summit, it's very fair. I mean, what happens to NATO from here?
Well, I would expect that they will find some sort of diplomatic compromise in Vilnius. There are different perspectives in to say, the Lithuanian government or the US government on this particular issue. And I would argue it's not the point at the moment, because no one really sees the US army deploying to Bakhmut. That's not going to happen. NATO is not going to go to war with Russia at this particular point. I mean, that's a fact of life. But what we need to do is to arm and help Ukraine. Short term with ammunition, long term or medium term with tanks and aircrafts and whatever, long term with building up a credible defense force so that Ukraine can defend itself with the assistance that we can give. That's the urgent thing that needs to be done now. Then I'm quite certain that when we have a stable and secure Ukraine, and in parallel with the accession to the European Union, it will move into NATO as well. But for the time being, I think they should focus. I hope that one will find a diplomatic compromise and then focus on the issues that are really relevant and really important in order to defeat Putin. That's the issue at the moment.
Well, thank you so much for that. On that note, unless you want to add something, Minister, very briefly. But
no.
On that note, we're good.
Thank you.
We've had the 2 points of view. Thank you very much. Thank you to both. Karl Bildt, who joined us remotely, but a friend of this conference, and we hope to see him very soon here in Brussels. And of course, Minister Tukate, thank you so much for joining us and your time.
Thank
Appreciate
you for
it.
moderating this panel.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for the two. Thanks.
Thanks.